Hello everyone, I'm Ayomide Bello, and this is Let There Be Light. Let There Be Light is a thought leadership series delivering insights on electricity laws and issues in Nigeria. Let There Be Light is brought to you by Akinwunmi and Busari, a full-service law firm situated in Lagos, Nigeria. On today's episode, we're delighted to have in the studio engineer Adeoye Fadeyibi, who is an astute professional with over 20 years in the power sector. He has worked in several key and strategic positions, from being the sales director of General Electric, serving Middle East and Africa, to being the MD CEO of Eco Electricity Distribution Company, the former MD CEO of Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, and who currently serves as the Power Sector Expert Advisor to the board of the Ibadan Electricity Distribution Company. Thank you very much, sir, for honoring our invitation and joining us at the studio.
Thank you for having me, Emily.
So I just want us to start off with explaining to the audience what ATCC means before we delve into these topics.
Thank you for having me again, Emily. I think in asking that question, you almost literally answered it. In the case of ATCC, reduction is actually an improvement.
Yes.
So it's a metric for power companies that probably the most important metric. I mean, it's an aggregate technical collection and commercial losses, and as the name implies, it's one. There are allowable losses within a business, especially of a disco. You expect to have some level of technical losses, which in some cases, as far as the different equipment losses that you might get along those lines, from the lines, from the transformer, from all of the assets that you have. You also then, the two that you then control mostly within the business is really around your commercial losses. So in the event that you get, so one, if you look at it from the commercial side, it has to do with all the funds that, basically, are you getting all the revenues back for all the electricity that you're selling to the public? Which is why you see a lot of focus on metering, one. It's important that you meter, and then so that you don't do so much estimated billing. That way, if you meter, and not just metering, but smart metering. If you meter smart, people pay for what they use. Now, energy theft becomes so important, so you have to, discos have to expend monies in making sure they have a revenue protection unit just to go around and make sure that the bypasses and free riders are not so many, because again, it adds to these losses that you have from a commercial side. Also, using the right type of equipment so that you don't use, quality, in terms of quality control, so that you can reduce a lot of those technical losses. So as a whole, I think a combination of how you run your business, how you do your meter rollout, how you ensure that areas that you are, building infrastructure out, you're using quality equipment, quality material. You're also ensuring that your revenue protection is in place. Again, response rate is good. You find customer behaviors, which is really the users today, they tend to do better when they're getting good supply, to be honest. So the more you can provide good quality supply of electricity and more hours, you find that people then pay. So it's a combination of many things, but yes, it's a single metric that can hire or fire a CEO of a disco.
All right, because it revolves around money.
Yeah.
To put it.
Well, money for the disco.
Yes.
And performance for the sector, and an improvement in quality for the customer.
And also money in terms of
and they come
payment
together, exactly. But people pay sometimes.
We'll go deeper into that conversation, but I just want us to start again from what has put us on this track, basically what has even led to this series, which is the foremost law that we have, Electricity Act of 2023, which was signed into law last year by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. What do you think is the impact of the act, especially on distribution companies in Nigeria?
Okay, so it goes while we're focusing on distribution companies, I think it's important to understand that the act in itself covers the electricity market as a whole. And why I say that is, it's so if you compare a NEC, which is on a federal level, the regulatory commission, what they've done is just to transfer regulatory oversight to states. I think it's like 9 at the last count or something, and they continue to do it too. Once NEC sees that state as ready to, so a way to put it so that it can be understood properly is, it's basically as they transfer this regulatory oversight to you, you then need to start putting together your electricity formation, if you put it that way. Outside of a Lagos state that has been, I don't know what Lagos state saw, but they had already started to have, so it was easy because they have the electricity board, there is a commission already where they've been having commissioners for years to look at state transactions on that level. And because they were also providing electricity, they had already started transacting. In this case, it's at a larger scale. After the regulatory oversight, I know states like Oyo have set up their first, the governor went straight into action. I know for a fact that probably we already knew of a commissioner who was the first commissioner in Oyo State, who immediately went into action and started working on megawatts, right? So once you have that, it basically means you have the license. They were required to go and partner with the existing discos. So to your question about discos, they were to immediately formulate what I would call a special purpose vehicle that would have, that special purpose vehicle would be the state, the discos that, because in some states, for most discos, it's more than one state. They cover more than one state. So all the states, they would have to form, with every state that's within the network, they would have to form an SPV, of which then that SPV will then do the business of providing electricity to the disco, as far as the disco is concerned. Now there's things that are complicated in that sense, right? So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. In terms of the operationalizing that vehicle, there's going to be issues around how do you even, when you transfer the assets, how do you decide which assets are for, there are boundary assets that serve, like, if you're on the border of Ikorodu and you're going to, or you're at Ekpe and you're about to go into Ikeja, how do you transfer those assets? That still needs to be worked out. How do you ensure that electricity, who takes liabilities? How does that all work? But more importantly, as the commissions are being set up for more progressive thinking states, what they would then do, I mean, if it were to be me, that's what I would do. They would set up what I call embedded power. So it allows you to fill your state with enough embedded generation, not necessarily, people use the word less reliance on the grid. I think they mean that from the perspective of, with all the grid disturbances, it means we will not be, I would rather than say use the word less reliance, I'll use the word less susceptible to grid failure, or grid issues, because we don't have enough. It's not a competitive environment yet, right? Even if states develops everything they can and the grid does better, we still probably wouldn't meet the demand in a few years. So I think basically it allows them to kick off, and the states in a structured way start to look at its electricity, because they would do other partnerships too. They can go in and do IPPs with, they can do with existing federal power plants. There are many options. So it just allows you to streamline it.
Yeah, but there's something there that I want to clarify, because we had a question as to jurisdictional overlap, which you mentioned, right? States like Oyo State, like you mentioned, have started work. They just went to full swing. So let's just take this and run with it, as well as Imo State and Enugu State.
Correct.
Right. But if we were going to take it like in bite size, how do you think? You mentioned embedded power or embedded power generation, right? could we have like maybe 2 or 3 in terms of power and control amongst the states? How do you foresee that would be resolved if there was to be an issue on that?
So that's a really good question. So my view is that there should be a collaborative approach. Like I keep saying, in the matter of demand and supply, we are way less than what is required. We're not even close to it. And I'll give you a simple example. When we looked at Oyo State and we were talking, we said, and I keep using that example because I like the approach they've taken in that state, which is move this thing forward. Same thing with Enugu, same thing with Imo. Where you have a deficit of, let's say, where you need, for example, let's say 5,000 megawatts, and you're currently doing 400. There's no jump in. By all means, jump in anyhow. Do it the right way, the structured way. And where you have boundary disputes, I think we should focus less on the disputes, worry about supply, and then let's look at dispute from, when I say dispute, focus less on making the dispute expensive, as opposed to figuring out how do we, there are ways you can agree who owns megawatts. You know where you're supplying, their addresses, their geotags to the different states. You can agree to, okay, cut it off, build new infrastructure on the other side of your assets, especially when you have tariff. Remember, if it goes into another disco, they have a different tariff element. Somebody might want a different tariff. Those are all things we can work out as we go. They will come. But I think focus first on getting as many megawatts, as many hours of availability. And there's other aspects. There's the whole renewable aspect. That's why I said I would rather look at this from the states. People thought it was really, NEC has given the order, now the states can take over from the discos. I'm not sure that is really how it should be looked at, or what the
That's how a lot of people interpret it, and so they expect that something has to be done. If the federal government won't do it, state government will do it.
Which is why I was very happy to be called to your program, to be honest, because I think awareness is also very important, right? This platform and what you guys have been doing is going to really help to get people to understand it. Knowledge is power. So reactions are emotions, right? The states where the states where they've had a tougher situation, with even areas within Lagos, within anywhere you go in Nigeria, anywhere where they've had issues with electricity or they generally are not happy with their supply, what you then tend to see is that it's more of like the way you say up NEPA is like up whatever that transaction was. They should come and take it away from this nonsense disco. But that is not the intention, right? It's going to help to, if anything, ensure that the state is able to almost selfishly, which is selfishly a good thing this time, take care of its own people, as opposed to less reliance to the things they cannot control. So a national grid, if it's going to have a lot of issues sometimes, or if they're going to be doing repairs, is going to lead to some sort of decentralization. And I'm always helpful to use that word. But look, it's a new era, it's a new reform. Just look at it as a reform, and it's going to take a whole new direction, and you will see it in terms of what people are doing. And the possibilities are endless in terms of what people will do.
So I like that, and I just want to recap something that you said, which in my own words is, let's focus on progress, let's focus on generating power, and not focus so much on the disputes. It's a new reform, like you said. I feel like that's also why law firms are here. In the event of disputes, then there will be a framework as to how to resolve these things, and also how to employ alternative dispute resolution techniques to resolve these things. The Electricity Act has opened the doors for domestic and foreign investments. How do you think that is going to positively or negatively impact the electricity market and the electricity consumers?
Okay. So if you look at the journey that got us here, has made, one, the local banks, I mean, from 13 years ago, I think 2013, 11 years ago when we started the privatization journey, there was, banks were a bit cautious. They still went in and invested. A lot of them, it didn't come out too good for a lot of them. But, again, the interventions had to happen when you had at the CBN level, when they had interventions to kind of, which is never really what you want to do. Now, the foreign investments that have had to come with some guarantees from a government side. Even today, as you can see, some of the metering programs, the money is on the World Bank for the rural electrification. I think the outside world prefers to invest with some guarantees on the sovereign side, right? So that they feel some level of comfort.
Assurance, yes.
Assurance, yes. Now you're just having bank to bank, right? A number of the banks in Nigeria now have global partnerships. They have global interactions of some sorts, or at least handshakes of some sorts with financial partners, equity funds, monies that are out there. So it ends up that the bank, the power business itself is not usually able in Nigeria right now to just walk out as they should and try and attract investments. The balance sheets are not great. They've had a really tough time in terms of, I don't think any disco is profitable in Nigeria today. I think maybe, I would say, if any, maybe one or two. I don't want to just...
That's a shocking revelation. And
yes.
And I'm laughing because I don't think the average Nigerian will believe that.
I agree. You see, so there's something we look at in Nigeria. We look at, if you have a business, as opposed to looking at the person, you look at if you go in for an investment, the first thing I want to ask you for, short, tall, nice shoes, I won't look at that. I'll go straight for your books, because your books is the health of the business, not you. So Nigerians are looking at what they think they see as affluence for the discos. That is not going to bring them electricity. A profitable business, which is being run properly, will bring them electricity, because the right investments will be able to go into the infrastructure, supply will be able to come, be able to fix, the grid issues will be done. So at the end of the day, I think what would happen would be the investments will start to come, and that's why I use the word profitable. It's not just, I'm using it from the question was around, can they attract investment?
Yes.
That's what the investors will look for, a healthy balance sheet. They'll look at the people behind it to see that, and then they look at the governance. They look at your framework. They want to know that their money comes in, they're able to retrieve their money back in the period, in the tenure or whatever terms that they agreed to. And I think that will begin to happen very quickly again. You're already seeing, so for example, you're seeing foreign investments, with the economic situation in the country, you're seeing a lot of foreign investments in individual and SME levels, right? Individuals are supplementing the grid power to reduce either their power supply or to increase hours where they can afford. Almost like a disco themselves. They're doing a blended tariff. So while they're doing that, you're having banks and finance houses. I'm sure you saw the Access Bank on TV. You're going to see more and more of those kind of things, right? Where people are going to look. When people look, then communities will look. When communities look, then small businesses will look. Then small areas will look. Then states will look. I know you guys have been working on something around, which I thought was pretty significant. You've been working on something around bringing together stakeholders to look at how you can do arrangements for SMEs and communities and all that. So at the end of the day, I think it's going to work really well in terms of this supply. Those will attract investments quicker because, again, it's an understood framework. They understand how it's going to move, what's going to happen. The user and the off-taker understands what's going to do to the supply situation. That's what some of the discos are going to have to now quickly try and put together in their marriage with the states. And the states would have to develop that before they can even start to put out viable projects. And in the states, based on that, we'll be able to attract the states plus the discos, we're able to attract the right investment. And industrialization,
Yes.
don't forget,
Okay.
because a number of states, different things drive different states. Some states is land. Some states have a lot of land, but they have a lot of rural communities. You have the $750 million rural electrification fund that came, and that's been being rolled out all over the country. Some states need it more than others. But they need to use that land too and convert it to some sort of, whether it's agro business, some type of industry that will hire people, employ a lot of people, so there's a lifestyle, people can afford the lifestyle.
Generates revenue.
Yes, but it's there, it's going to work.
Okay, so out of curiosity, I want to know if you actually have data, because you said investors will look at your books, right? I'm guessing that's financials.
Yes.
But what about data? There are so many stories that we hear, like, they brought a bill this month to this particular house, and then they brought another bill in that same month to this particular house. Like, could it be that there isn't accurate, or there is no data as to how many houses are in a location, community, states? Because I feel sometimes the conversations with investors can get very granular and say, okay, how many houses do you project or estimate that you generate XYZ amount from? So I just want to know, because you've worked, on the distribution side and on the tackling challenges as to metering and, reducing losses. Do we have data? Is there data? Is it available? Is it accessible? Even if I just wanted to, based on, freedom of information, I wanted to know what it would, like how many houses are in a particular area, vicinity, or state.
The expectation is that all discos should have at least accurate or close to accurate data. It forms actually the bedrock of the business itself. It's like a bank without knowing how many customers you have, right? The bank would today have, probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the bank would have inaccurate data because maybe they've taken on some new customers manually at this, and then they've not sent it to headquarters. But I'm just using that example because it's very close to what it would be in power, right? So at the beginning of this, the data might have been inaccurate, many accounts that don't exist, addresses that don't exist, addresses where roads that was there since old NEPA days, now roads have been built there, the houses have been removed, nobody updated the data. All that said, those should have, in a normal system, for example, if a house is removed from somewhere, it would be from, let's say, due to a permit, or they were rewarded because road was going to happen. In an ideal world, there would be a database that allows the fact that that house address no longer exists. The utility companies in that area that serve that house would get some kind of information that alerts them that that house doesn't exist anymore. They would update it. Same thing will happen with lands. They wouldn't get a water bill again because they've been informed that water. But unfortunately, here, it's events that trigger an update, some kind of updation of the enumeration data. So the enumeration data is like the simple database that basically you go and you tag. So now what you're seeing is there's a geotagging of. So if you look at least the core and Abuja that I can talk about, there was a full exercise, which is continuous, by the way, like I said, in Nigeria, because nothing gets auto-updated because a house doesn't exist. You have customers, for example, maybe they knew or didn't know. We had examples of customers that when they're leaving the area, because they contributed a lot for that transformer, they will just remove the transformer along to their new location. Here we see it sometimes with offices. People that invested and said, look, there's no reason for me to leave this here for this area. So they remove it. Meters, they will remove it. Those two things I said, we call them the asset tagging. So there's the asset tagging to the customer, asset enumeration to customer enumeration. Asset side, everything from the feeder. So we know what feeder feeds you to your transformer, to the substation, feeder there to transformer to customer meter. Everything has to be in the system. One, for where the future should be, which is where we should have been, which is SCADA. Where when you have a system where you can see your whole system, that means, one, I need it technically to know everything that leads to a customer. So that, for example, if there's a fault, you can triangulate quickly. If it affects 1,000 people, or I know where the fault is, I can isolate it to 80 people, so that 1,000 people just don't go without electricity. So enumeration data is available. The problem is usually, and NERC, I think, has been doing a good job over the years of staying on almost quarterly. They need you to verify and revalidate. I forget how many, I don't know how many months they do it now, but they're really on discos to revalidate the enumeration data, upload it into their commercials, into their billing system or other systems, and then send it to NERC. And unfortunately, a lot of it is quite manual. They have to hire a lot of people to go around with geotagging devices and, look at locations.
So definitely, this is one of the things that have to be considered in the infrastructure, the ecosystem, or the basically what we're trying to build now. We have to consider how this data will not be lost, how it will be more accurate, and how we can actually put policies or procedures, processes in place to make sure that everything should be auto-generated.
Yeah.
Or almost.
I think, you see, we were just talking here, we've come up with 4 or 5 massive opportunities. The power it unlocks the idea. One thing we've said, for example, as you were talking, was there was need to have, apart from like the NIN, the banks today are uploading and asking everybody to bring the NIN. It's almost syncing data. Who cares the most more than the bank about where do you stay? Where's your current address? The bank wants to know that you've moved, especially if they are giving you facilities or something. So part of what you're looking at is how, in just that question you asked, is how do I ensure that the enumeration data, that means houses exist, apartments exist, a location exists, the person that is staying there is there. So those solutions, imagine in a state would need to charge some kind of state tax or levy, whatever it is that the state interacts with you, a resident, a lot more than the federal government interacts with you. So I think, again, it unlocks possibilities for our IT people, for, creates employment for young folks out there that are getting real good at this,
Yes, data analytics,
data, crypto
data
world.
mining.
Data mining,
All of you guys, there's a job for you, so don't jackpot just yet.
Exactly. I know, but it's serious. I think they can, the brilliant things I've seen our people do here locally, you'll be shocked. A lot of, our IT savvy people, I think we compete with some of the best in the world. I think today, if the state has set its own boundaries, if they've been good enough to know where their boundaries are between Lagos and Ogun, right? Between Ogun and Oyo, they know their boundary. If you go to Songo, if you're coming in, they know every boundary. In that boundary too, as you're going past Ore, Benin is starting to look and tell you where you're starting to enter Edo. Maybe those guys can help with digitizing those boundaries. And if they digitize those boundaries, then they take it from the boundaries and use technology. And these are our young guys, and use it to enumerate the state residents.
I'll make sure that this is highlighted and shared so that people can actually open their mind to the possibilities.
You'll be shocked. I'm sure they've already started. I'm sure they're out there.
Right. There's just something I want to say. Pick out from what you said. I was watching an interview about 2 weeks ago, and one of the hosts was complaining how an estate will contribute money and buy a transformer, or someone that owns a house in the estate will buy their own meter. Why can't they take it away? And there is that, I feel like for the longest time, we've always felt that we could take it away, but we actually cannot. So just explain why we cannot, and why, people should just understand once and for all that they cannot. And what the alternatives are, because, I've spent money on this, so how do I get my money back?
So it's most unfortunate, right, that when people buy, it's usually from a point of necessity.
Desperation.
And that's why it's always good for executives of power companies to where while the executive take that cap off every now and then and wear a customer hat, right? A new builder, there's, while the disco has financial difficulties, stocking up, having enough material to just do, the problems won't finish, right? They have to prioritize. There are no problems out there. But owners are building out more requirements, more congestion. The load on the existing assets is getting too much, is overloaded. An area has to look at, will we manage or do we need to get one now? It's always a function of, we need it now, the disco can't get it now. But it's understood. NEC continues to remind everybody not to buy. I know I see that every now and then they will write in the papers, nobody should buy any assets for disco. Now, the only thing is, and it's not just, I can understand if you put 5 million of your money, you all gather in your area and you buy some assets for the disco. It's natural in the human mindset to expect that I will enjoy these things till I'm fully satisfied that 5 million, I've used it.
Yes.
Or if I'm moving away from this area, I'm taking it with me because it's mine. Unfortunately, there are many other reasons, and you'll be shocked from a technical and safety standpoint, from the enumeration standpoint that you mentioned earlier. Once you bought that asset, it's actually not that it's your personal property. You buy it, and once you buy it, it's a transferred asset to the disco. You actually just donated it. We call it, in fact, they still use that word donation, if I get it correctly. And the reason is because, unlike in your house, where if you bought a dog or bought furniture, you have the capacity to take care of it. Once you buy it and you donate it and it's energized with electricity going through it, it's no longer your pet. They have to make sure that everything that's supposed to be done from a safety standpoint, from a supply standpoint, they have to have it on their asset base. They have to know when it's faulty. They have to know. So that's how it's supposed to continue. And NEC is aware that asset has now formed part of their assets. And again, once the disco tries to be, reasonable too, they try to, with best intentions, ensure that it's functioning properly, and you at least feel like you got satisfaction from your spending. But don't pick it up. People pick up the meter and take it away, connect it at a new location. In the past, it would work. Today, because as we are digitizing, you get there, you want to load that meter at that location, it's not synced to where it was installed anymore.
So let's talk about financial stability of discos. With the entry of private investors or private investors generally into the electricity markets, what changes, if any, right, to revenue collection and pricing models do you think will be necessary?
You want to know if more people move to Band-A? Or no, look, I think it's a service-based tariff system, right? Whilst a lot of people accepted the Band-A, a lot more people also rejected the Band-A. Not for reasons of not understanding that there's a cost that of supplying this electricity. They're looking at it more from a very understandable economic condition. If a portion of my dispensable income is gone,
Yeah.
and we have said that the income I make is reasonable. If it's reasonable and they cannot pay for this expense, light, then how is it reasonable? So unless you would, so some people have a mindset of, unless you would triple my salary, for example, there's no way you can triple my light bill. Since my light bill forms, it's like tripling school fees or tripling, some things form a majority of what you spend because you use it every day. So in terms of conserving energy, people will do different things to manage that whole pricing thing, right? With investors coming in, they will look at spreading their investment over reasonable periods. You don't expect that you're going to start getting money back, right? That would not be the approach. Invest in infrastructure, get supply out, negotiate, for industries that need it. Once you get enough out, the tariff would actually, funny enough, not go higher. It will come down.
Hopefully.
Well, it will, because there is a model. There's a way you can you model it. If you get it out to enough people, and the investors. So if investors come in, what are they going to do, right? They're going to what? More availability.
Mm.
The reason why you want more investors will be able to supply better, whether it's more quality, more availability. It all comes down to you're going to get more power out there, and you're going to figure out a way to get all your revenue back. So there's going to be IT systems, there's going to be investment in hardware, investment in basic software. So someone are going to work on their billing systems, their collection systems. They're going to give multiple channels to payment channels to people who want to pay from their phone, they want to pay from home, they want to pay from don't pay from anywhere in the world. People want to have many options on how to pay. So those are all things that investors would come in and invest in to make the business better, the customer happier. Once you have a happy customer, good business, and it's going to be around the governance frameworks, right? The investments are going to look at how are these businesses going to be run as transparently as possible. You said something earlier, which that once you heard that the discos are not profitable at this point, you're like, that's hard to believe. A lot of people don't think that. I hear you. I hear it every day too. An investor, just like customers are saying, just like you're saying, a lot of people are saying no, they'll find that hard to believe. Investors looking from outside, I find that hard to believe too. So what they're doing is they're going to people like you guys to go and, I know they send questions a lot of love, you law firms that they understand. The first thing they go and look at is you guys that understand the sector, and then they go to each of you, and I know they do that privately, and say, please look into, Adeoye Disco, and tell us if what we see
Is what is.
Yeah. Look into it and tell us. And that's what people are having to do. And I think you're going to see more of that. So in terms of the finances and what it would do to revenues, I think it's simple. I think the investment should come in for the right things. You've seen today a lot of focus at the federal level on metering.
Mm-hmm.
So millions of dollars there's been a couple of different metering schemes. The recent one is the Presidential Metering Initiative. I think it's PMI or something it's called. And what they've done is partnered almost a country-to-country partnership that has formed the basis for guaranteeing the funds that have now gone to the different discos. I think for the country, they're looking at almost $2 million meters a year for the next couple of years. That means now different discos will have to look at the different rollout mechanisms. And if investors are going to come in, let's disrupt the space. You might find talks. I woke up this morning to an article on recapitalization of the discos. Those are all things you see when investment is coming around the corner, right?
Yeah.
Because someone is saying, let's recapitalize. Let's go and count and look at everybody where you might have seen, where the Ecos or the Kejas or the, Abujas have done more maybe because of the, how it looks, how their demographics, they've done more, they've moved far. There might have been other discos that have had more difficult times, right? And what they would do is to look at what is the value now? Let's look at recapitalizing. And you have an example of that. When people are doing good, kudos to them. You have Enugu, like I said. You have Oyo. I've been watching Enugu very closely. I think they're going to do some things very quickly. That's a case where you see a state that's coming. Imo, I can see the direction they're going. They would help with some of this, getting investors in to do the right thing, because they're already moving into the right spaces.
Yeah, it's very clear that this is an evolving market, and it's going to be a very interesting legal terrain, and we're ready for it. We're ready for it. And just to close up, what's your future outlook on the Nigeria electricity market? Just to cap it all.
Explosive. I think I'm super excited about this market from a demand side. If you understood opportunity, you don't have to be a power expert. And I'm saying that to everybody out there. You don't have to be a power person even. Just understand that power is something you need every day. Think about it from that perspective. And think that we might be supplying only 10% of what we really need. Now, what does that mean? In a digitized, as you're going to a digital space, there is nothing but opportunity. So what I would say, if I was defining in very short words, would be it's going to be like a revolution in terms of, I'll call it, it will be where industrialization meets what you call conservation. People have to do more with less. They have to, people are earning, you talk about, to have the idea that somebody is earning 30,000 and goes to an office today, and, think about it quickly. There's really not, the person that's paying 30 or paying 60 or paying 70, sometimes it's not necessarily wicked. If they look at the revenues they make, that's what they can reasonably pay. But the problem is that we all have an understanding that from me that I'm paying to you that you're spending, all of us cannot afford it. It forms opportunity. I think with the natural resource, whether it's the hydrocarbons, the hydros, in form of any renewables, the interconnected mini grids that they're working on now, the off-grid systems, the solar, those are all opportunities. And what you're seeing is a decentralization. People are now doing system-to-system negotiations, agreements, terms. Personally, I'm not looking to call, a solar company. My business is looking to reduce. I'm looking to conserve, because people are understanding the discipline behind conserving, right?
Yes.
I think that's where we're going. It's endless.
That's interesting. You've convinced me today that, the Electricity Act 2023 has set something good in motion.
Absolutely. But I'm a sales guy. Don't forget, I used to be a sales director.
I'm sold. Anyways, thank you so very much, Engineer Fadeyibi. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to our viewers and to our listeners. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Engage in this conversation, leave a comment, share this content, and join us again for the next episode. I remain Adeoye Fadeyibi. Thank you.